Between 1963 and 1968, the BBC produced 5 seasons of time-travelling adventures. The titular role and infamous monsters have captivated generations for over half a century. However, 97 episodes of the Doctor's early adventures are missing, believed wiped forever. In this series, we explore one of TV's greatest heroes, the history and influences of these lost classics, in Doctor Who Most Wanted.
It's been a very long time since we last chatted. In fact, it's been 6 years nearly. And I think we should tell everyone that
It's not personal.
I did keep asking and sending cards, but no response, John.
I moved house.
Didn't tell me, John. You didn't tell me. Today, we're going to be discussing the long and anticipated release of The Evil of the Daleks, to give it its proper title, but in animation form. And we're just going to backtrack a little bit 6 years ago, because we did a little get together of several people talking about the missing episodes of Doctor Who back in 2015. But I'm sorry to say that since that time, there has been no significant finds of Doctor Who. Terry Nation wanted to take the Daleks in a different direction, didn't he?
He wanted to take them to their own television spin-off, either here or in the US.
How do you think it would have developed, the American series, given that, I mean, with hindsight, there's pretty sort of great graphics now, isn't there, and sort of special effects that have been developed. But you know, we had in the 60s things like the Avengers, we had things coming over from America with Irwin Allen's you know, the Time Tunnel and Lost in Space.
I love those series.
Do you think it would have gone along a similar line, or do you think it would have been more British?
I think it would have been less camp. But I mean, I've read a synopsis of the storyline, and Big Finish did an audio adaptation of it, which starred Jean Marsh as Sarah Kingdom, as she did in the Daleks Master Plan. And it's very... In fact, Big Finish didn't do much to the script. I believe it's adapted it straight away, because they do a narration to add all the visual descriptions that would have been there from a screenplay. It feels very kind of boys' own, not the band, but boys' own adventure, kind of Biggles, just the kind of stuff that Terry Nation always based his material on, that he grew up as a boy reading the pulp fiction, the pulp comic books. And I think it would have been, I can't imagine, it might have been like Man from U.N.C.L.E. in a way, because I mean the Space Security Service weren't quite spies, because they were more like a police force or an army, But you're up against the Daleks. You've got this ongoing story arc, maybe, of a Dalek war developing. You know, a bit of a Cold War, perhaps, investigating what the latest Dalek plan is. I just don't know what his ideas were beyond the pilot script. I just think it would have had that kind of, as you say, maybe the Owen Allen kind of look to Lost in Space had, or it's an incredible what if, isn't it? But could it sustain a TV series? That's the thing. If it's only the Daleks, but then you've got allies, maybe, you know.
I suppose by 65, you could argue that the Daleks had hit the peak.
That was the peak of Dalek Mania, wasn't it?
Yeah. And just as it so happens, I have the Dalek Pocket Book Guide to Space and Time Traveler's Guide, because I know we're going to be talking a little bit about David Whittaker, who was really part of the team who propelled the Daleks. But it's ironic, isn't it? Because after the evil of the Daleks, there are no more Dalek stories until Day of the Daleks, which isn't even written by Nation.
Well, that was the thing. Nation went, I'm shopping this script to America. Could you please write the Daleks out of Doctor Who, please? And so I suppose David Whittaker, being the sort of deputy Dalek writer, was the one chosen to write those scripts. You know, as no longer a script editor or part of a production team. He wrote the Power of the Daleks, I suppose, because it was familiar characters for the audience to accept a new Doctor. And then with Evil of the Daleks, it was kind of writing them out. And as to quote the Doctor, it's like the final end of the Daleks. You know, it's a full stop. And as you say, until 72, you know, Barry Lex and went, hey, why don't we bring the Daleks back? They've not been seen for a while, have they?
Yeah, because, I mean, Day of the Daleks is a very different feel to the Planet of the Daleks, which really does bring back those familiar sort of nation
stereotypes.
It's a typical of his writing. Yeah.
Oh, of course. In fact, Day of the Daleks wasn't even a Dalek script to begin with. They were added to it at the writing stage, but I think it works very well. Although they'd forgotten how to do Dalek voices by that point, because they're a bit weedy in that one.
And there's one or two performances in the Day of the Daleks which we tend to gloss over and say, okay. But I wonder, do you think during that 67 period, and since there was such a huge gap then for another Dalek story, do you think the Daleks really did stagnate and didn't develop any further when it could have possibly gone a little bit on if Nation had sort of released and said, yeah, I'm quite happy for other people to write a Dalek story on using my creations?
That's, you know, I'm not even sure that they consulted him when they made Day of the Daleks. And so when he became aware of it, he kind of went, could you please let me know if you're going to do them again so I can have first refusal on writing it? So I don't think he objected too much, because he would have obviously got royalties for their use. But I don't know. It's just kind of like they sit there, and I don't think anything ever happens. They probably appeared in comic strips maybe in that time. I'm not sure. So I think the Dalek comic strips had finished by that point, hadn't they?
I was rooting through my stockpile of Doctor Who, I suppose we call it memorabilia.
Yeah.
And I came across this, which was the Radio Time special.
Oh, the 10th anniversary special.
Yeah. This is the reproduction one. It says 30p on the front. It didn't cost me 30p. It cost a lot more. But in the middle of this is a story by Terry Nation. We Are the Daleks. Now,
I've read that. It's a good story.
It is a good story. And I was really sort of, wow. I more or less guessed who had done the dirty on the crew of the ship that was going to explore Extelium. Is it Extelium, a planet?
I can't remember the details.
But this is interesting because the artwork in the magazine is by a chap called Philip Castle, and Philip Castle did the artwork for the clockwork orange. So
Oh.
it's a very distinctive style. But I actually think that the story itself holds up pretty well. And it's not typical of Nation's sort of style, even though there's familiar characters, familiar
Yeah.
themes. It does have a quite stark ending. Yeah, but just getting back to the evil of the Daleks, it was the first time we saw the Emperor Dalek, on screen.
Yes.
For 67, that must have been quite, whoa, this is quite something.
It is quite big when you see people stood next to it on its podium. It's very imposing Dalek. It's basically just a massive Dalek. But I always laugh. The effects designers always nicknamed it the Queen Dalek.
Right. But it's strange that they've used the clip that's been released of the evil of the Daleks, and it's the revelation, if you like, when the Doctor comes face to face with the Emperor Dalek. Again, and then other versions start coming in, don't they? In sort of the globe, the Golden Globe Dalek
From the comics,
Yeah,
which was before Evil of the Daleks.
Yeah.
But I suppose they didn't want to copy the comic strip, did they? Do their own thing.
We got the recovery of Tomb of the Cybermen, which admittedly is a story which is only 4 parts as opposed to 7. But again, the production values in this is still pretty high, isn't it? They are pretty high value. We think of Doctor Who as sort of wobbly sets and sort of rubber monsters and something going wrong that you tend to gloss over and say, oh, well,
Yes.
it doesn't really matter. But
the rest of it's fine. Yeah.
I suppose in comparison to the evil of the Daleks, which we can only base on 1 episode.
Well, we do have the soundtrack and the telly snaps, so you can see what it looked like. But seeing it in motion, you're right, is different.
But can
a different
we
experience, isn't it?
Can we say with a sort of degree of, I suppose, would it have been as good as The Tomb, which was pretty glossy, wasn't it? It's nice and shiny, and sort of you got the most, I suppose, in precedence. It's the next sort of monster in Doctor Who that you probably remember, are the Daleks. But the sets are impressive. They've got impressive sort of acting. I mean, George Pastel, which makes a terrific baddie. And you've got all the sort of themes, don't you, that going on. And I was looking at a photograph of George Pastel as he's looking up at the monitor and the dial, and a huge set, absolutely huge set.
It is, isn't it?
It is a shame that we don't have the last couple of episodes of Evil, because I'm sure that from the photographs they are quite sort of way out, the sets, aren't they?
Oh yes, I don't know if you recall, for the 30 years of the TARDIS documentary, for the 30th anniversary, they recreated the Dalek Emperor throne room set. Well, throne room. But yeah, they recreated that and built the Emperor, and it looked impressive at that fan recreation for the VC documentary. So imagine what the original would have looked like. There's behind the scenes 8mm silent film that was taken of the special effects film and done at Ealing for Evil of the Daleks, and it looks impressive there even, and this is behind the scenes stuff, so you've got cameramen in a way or effects people, so it's such a great set as well. Just a simple structure against a black background suggests size, doesn't it, so well.
This place has the smell of death about it, Mr. Degani. Quite the contrary. What's so funny? I was thinking about when I returned to Earth, I shall be... No matter. Oh, please, hurry. We need to return to the ship at 1700 hours. Patience, my friend. Everything we have worked for is now within our grasp. What's down there? Look, if you want my cooperation, you better start telling me what this expedition is all about. I seem to remember, Mr. Harrison, that you took my money eagerly enough. That was before you dragged me and my crew to the other end of the solar system. We barely have enough fuel to get back to Earth. We are not going back. Not yet, anyhow. What? Just who the hell do you think you are? Earth is weak, Mr. Harrison, and ripe for the picking. War, famine, disease will be eradicated and replaced by one order. The Order of the Noble Logicians. You're mad. You and him, you're gonna rule the Earth? That's it. I've made the connection. Take a look, Mr. Harrison, at my new army. Are those Cybermen? Look, Degani, I'm out. You and your crazy friend here are welcome to. Now, come on. A bribery is such an ugly thing. However, it is very useful on occasion, so that's it. You're gonna kill me, eh? Of course not, Mr. Harrison. You're far too valuable a commodity. Centuries ago, Mondos was like our Earth, until the Mondasians realized they were dying. So they began to replace themselves, little by little. Only they paid a terrible price. The essence of what makes us all human, the brain, replaced by a positronic one. Their thoughts turned to the ultimate science. Only it didn't stop there, did it, Pagani? And now they need spare parts?
So is the evil of the Daleks Troughton's coming of age story?
Possibly. I mean, he does a lot in it. He plays a range of emotions in it. You know, he plays detective for the first 2 episodes to find what happened to the TARDIS, and then he's manipulated or forced into experimenting on Jamie to find the human factor by the Daleks. And there's some very good scenes with him and Jamie arguing over what they're going to do, which I think, bar a few arguments with Ian, had never been done in Doctor Who before. Real interpersonal drama. And then, you know, and then at the end, when he confronts the Emperor, he's not the clownish Doctor, is he? He is the Emperor's equal when he's talking to the Emperor. And he plays it extremely well.
I think in part this has got to do with Sean Sutton taking the helm, although he wasn't immediately given the sort of title of head of drama. They let him sort of linger on for 2 years doing the job, and then they said, "Would you mind doing head of drama for us, Sean?" Which he did for a long time at the BBC. But his work and his output was colossal. I mean, he had very, very few failures, is the truth, other than Churchill's people. Will evil of the Daleks be given a traditional treatment, or will it go way out? And it's the version we would have liked to have seen.
Of course, because from a purist point of view, you know, you want black and white for free, which I think The Invasion did. The very first one were the animated episodes 1 and 4, which were done by Cosgrove Hall, who obviously famously did Danger Mouse and other well-known animations, but they turned out to be too expensive. So that's why you got the varying styles, haven't you? Different production companies doing it for less and less money, because obviously animation's still not cheap. But the recent ones, because they're going through a whole range of Troutons, aren't they now? Is to do them widescreen in black and white and sometimes and color, like the Macroterror or Fury from the Deep. You've got both options available, I believe.
And the steelbook versions, I think, John.
So you've got the option if you want to buy the expensive version, but for me, I'm happy with black and white widescreen, or even I could turn the color down on my television set, if there's only a color version. But I suppose controversially, you need to remember that these were only made in black and white because they had no alternative. BBC One was still in black and white at this point, and I doubt the BBC would have treated it as much of a flagship and given it color straight away. I mean, I'm not sure what the first BBC One drama was in colour. I know there's Sherlock Holmes with Peter Cushing, that was in colour. Was that 66, 67?
Well, certainly there have been experiments. I mean, the first channel, I think, to show colour was, of course, BBC Two for Wimbledon. That was, if you like tennis, that's fine. But they could have gone down that route, couldn't they? They could have started to produce in colour towards the end of the War Games, but they decided to keep the monochrome look for the first two Doctors and then go full out for the Pertwee seasons. And again, strangely enough, we know how difficult it has been for restoration with the sort of grading and recovery of certain programs. Just on a sort of note for Whittaker, is it he died sort of very young, didn't he? He died sort of early 50s. Is it a loss that we didn't get to see his novelizations of Enemy or The Evil of the Daleks? How much more insight could he have offered us, do you think, John?
It's interesting. I've got a half memory of reading an article based on Whittaker wrote a little memo or a note on his outline for the Enemy of the World novelization, which obviously he died before he could write the novel. And when Ian Martin did it, he just based it on the scripts. But I believe he was going to make it even more action orientated than the televised version. And maybe it would have given us more of an insight into Salamander, Doctor's doppelganger. But with the Evil of the Daleks novelization, obviously that came much later in the 90s with John Peel, which I never got around to buying, and now it's out of my price range. But I believe one of the things in there is that because it's written in the 90s, John Peel introduces this theory that the Emperor Dalek we see is an evolved version of Davros. Because we saw Davros in that white domed version of the Emperor you saw in the TV 21 comic strips of the 60s in Remembrance of the Daleks. And Peel obviously went, well, if Davros is pretending to be the Emperor then, maybe he becomes even less mobile. And he's stuck there in that throne room.
What is this place? It isn't on the map.
That, my friend, is the Dalek weapons and chemical base, and we're going to blow them sky high. Daleks? Are you out of your mind? Sorry, but there's no going back now. Get down. Dalek Patrol. Phew, that was a close one.
We better be more careful. Why are we here anyhow? Our secret operatives tell us that the Daleks have invented a new weapon called a Fertikiller. It spreads lethal spores into the atmosphere and kills all living vegetation and animal life in less than 48 hours. Nothing can stop it. If we don't destroy this base, the outer colonies will be wiped out. Gee, that sounds nearly as bad as the Dreamweaver. Remember Exelon 9? Everyone went about in a dreamlike state, then wham! The invasion started.
Hey, but let's not forget the Funderizer. It can send gigantic vibrations, shattering buildings and machinery.
But what about the Voltoscope? Imagine having a huge flashlight beaming down onto you, causing blindness.
Well, my daddy was in the tank troop and got glued between the controls when he fired on a Dalek invasion force.
Did you make that up?
It's true, I tell you. It was called the Bubble Gum Machine. Well, my uncle was trapped in the magnetizer and was sent to Phoebos 17 and made to hollow out the planet so the Daleks could pilot it through space. You tell me he was an accountant. Ah, forget it, Max. You don't know anything about Daleks.
You know, as much as we might enjoy listening to these soundtracks of narration, they are originally a visual product, aren't they? They're made to be seen, and so these suspenseful scenes, for example, of characters wandering down corridors avoiding Daleks, don't quite have the same feel if you can't see it.
Well, I think for somebody who's not seen or listened to
No.
The Evil of the Daleks, it will come across as quite fresh. I don't know where, in terms of ranking, it comes in fans, because quite honestly, I do have I've watched The Power of the Daleks countless times, and I still enjoy the interaction of the humans who are so gullible in it. Let's face it, John, they're gullible,
Yes.
aren't they?
They are very,
You know,
especially the rebels.
I'm not sure what David Whittaker was trying to say to all of us, but anything with a sucker and an egg whisk who is offering you unlimited technology can't be up to any good. But
No.
having said that, the 60s were littered with those sort of themes, weren't they? A for Andromeda was about a sort of alien intelligence telling Earthmen how to build a computer, who turns into sort of a physical presence in the end. So it's not an unusual plot line by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it has a classic Doctor Who element to it, doesn't it?
It's well, I suppose the scientist who won't let anything get in his way of achieving his goal, or even stroking his own ego. Because in a similar way, in Evil of the Daleks, you've got Maxtable, who, minor spoiler, teams up with the Daleks in return for them giving him the secret of turning base metal into gold. He does it all for greed. Obviously, the Daleks have their own plan, but they easily buy him with this false promise, because they're not going to give it to him. They probably can't even do it themselves, but they appeal to this man's ego.
So there we are, John. I think we've probably reached a conclusion that we will probably go out and buy this steelbook version of The Evil of the Daleks, and maybe the reissue of the steelbook of The Evil of the Daleks after another couple of years. Yes, absolutely. And who knows, they may just turn up one day and then we'd have to buy the steelbook version of the original broadcast in full stereo, I hope. John, it has been a delight talking to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much for coming on and giving your insight, your very knowledgeable insight on the evil of the Daleks.